My name's Daniel Ross, 42 years old, born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. I've never been the type of man to beg for attention, not from anyone, and especially not from a woman I'm married to. I believe that respect is the foundation of any relationship, and the day that respect dies, the rest follows. I met Claire when I was 35. Back then, I wasn't rich. I worked as a regional project manager for a construction supply company, making a comfortable salary. I owned my own home, a modest two-bedroom ranch-style house on the outskirts of the city, which I'd paid off years earlier. I had a decent truck, no debt, and I lived within my means. Claire came into my life through mutual friends at a barbecue, and at first glance, she was stunning. Blonde hair, always well put together, and she had this energy that made a room turn to look at her. I'll admit, I was drawn in quickly. The first year of our relationship was good. We traveled locally, went out on weekends, and she seemed genuinely interested in building a life together. We married after just under 2 years of dating. That's when I started to notice the shift. Claire had always liked nice things, expensive handbags, luxury skincare, dining at places where the check was more than a week's worth of groceries. At first, I thought, she works hard, she's allowed to enjoy herself. She was a dental hygienist, making a decent income herself, so I figured it was manageable. But once we got married, the tone changed. Her money became hers, while my money became ours. It wasn't an open discussion. It was more of an unspoken expectation that I would now cover the mortgage, utilities, groceries, date nights, vacations, everything. She slowly stopped contributing financially, saying things like, I should be saving my money in case we need it for something important, but somehow that something important never seemed to arrive. Instead, she always had a new outfit, new jewelry, new shoes. By our second year of marriage, the emotional distance started. It began subtly. She'd be too tired when I'd suggest spending time together in the evenings. She'd roll over in bed without so much as a goodnight kiss. On weekends, she'd make plans with her friends instead of with me. When I brought it up, she'd dismiss it with, you're imagining things, or not everything has to be about you. And here's the thing. I'm not the guy who pushes or whines. I'm not chasing intimacy like some desperate teenager. If she didn't want to be close, I wasn't going to beg. I kept my dignity. But I also started to see her clearly, a woman who valued what was in my bank account far more than the man standing in front of her. Then came the call from my father's attorney. My dad, who had been battling cancer for years, passed away. We weren't a wealthy family growing up. He'd worked his whole life as a land developer and made smart investments, but he never flaunted it. I knew he had property and assets, but I didn't know the scale until the lawyer told me. I was the sole heir to an estate worth a little over $4.6 million, a mix of cash, land, and investment accounts. I sat there in the attorney's office in stunned silence. That kind of money changes a man's options overnight. But here's the thing, my first thought wasn't about yachts, cars, or moving to Miami. My first thought was about Claire. Not because I wanted to shower her with riches, but because I wanted to know if the woman I married would change if she knew I was suddenly a multimillionaire. And then I realized I didn't need to find out by telling her. I signed the inheritance paperwork, opened a new account at a separate bank, and moved every cent there. I kept my old checking account as it was. I didn't upgrade my truck. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't change a single visible thing about my lifestyle. I continued going to work, wearing the same steel-toe boots, packing my own lunches, and living in the same modest home. Why? Because I wanted to see her true face without the mask. And boy, did I. Within a month, she started making more comments about how I wasn't ambitious enough. She'd say things like, you should be looking for a better paying job, or my friend's husband just got a huge promotion, and now they're looking at buying a place at the beach. She'd joke in front of people, Daniel's so frugal, he still wears jeans from high school, and laugh like it was harmless. But I could hear the bite in her tone. At the same time, her intimacy with me was practically non-existent. She acted like sharing a bed was just a formality. But her requests for money increased. New furniture, another vacation, a girls' weekend in Miami. Every time I'd push back, she'd sulk or accuse me of not caring about her happiness. I stayed calm, never letting on that I had millions sitting quietly in a high-yield investment account. If she had loved me for me, the money would have been a blessing for both of us. But by then, I already knew the truth. She didn't care who I was, only what I could provide. And since she thought I wasn't providing enough, her loyalty was already hanging by a thread. My friends later told me they couldn't believe I didn't just throw her out right then. But that's not how I operate. I wanted her decision to be completely hers. I wanted her to think I had nothing, so that when she walked away, she was choosing it freely and couldn't come crawling back when things got hard. That meant playing the long game, staying silent, and letting her think she was the one in control. By the time we hit year 4 of marriage, I'd stopped expecting warmth from her. The way she saw it, marriage was supposed to be an open wallet that never closed. Her comments about better men had become more frequent, and she compared me to her friends' husbands almost every week. I didn't respond with anger. I didn't argue. I just listened and filed every word away. That calm silence unnerved her sometimes, but she mistook it for passivity. In reality, it was me taking control. I knew exactly how I was going to walk away when the time came, and it would be on my terms, with every legal angle covered. The moment that sealed it for me came on a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Claire walked in, still in her robe, scrolling on her phone. Without looking up, she said, "So, I'm thinking we should separate for a while. You're not really giving me what I need. I want more out of life. More excitement, more security." More security. That word right there told me everything. In her mind, security wasn't emotional or relational. It was financial. She wanted someone who'd bankroll her lifestyle without questioning her spending. I took a slow sip of my coffee, looked her in the eye, and said, "If that's what you want, I won't stop you." She blinked like she didn't expect me to agree so easily. Then she tried to stir some drama, saying, "Wow, that's it? You don't even care enough to fight for me. You've already made up your mind, Claire. Fighting would just be for show. If you think you can find a better life, you should go find it." She didn't realize it, but that was the moment I mentally closed the door on our marriage. She wanted the exit? I was holding it open. In North Carolina, where we live, marital property laws are based on equitable distribution, not community property. That means only assets acquired during the marriage are split. And even then, it's about what's fair, not necessarily 50-50. Since my house had been purchased years before I even met her, and I kept my inheritance entirely separate from joint accounts, neither the home nor my millions were marital property. I'd been careful. Every paycheck from my job went into our joint account for bills. My inheritance went into an entirely separate account under my name only, and I never used it to pay household expenses. Inheritance money, by law, remains the separate property of the person who received it unless you commingle it with marital funds. I hadn't made that mistake. The only shared assets were a joint savings account with about $18,000 in it, the furniture we bought together, and a 2018 SUV that was in her name. She could keep the SUV. It was fully paid off, and I didn't need it. I called my attorney, a no-nonsense guy named Mark Rivers, and explained the situation. Mark had handled my father's estate and knew my financial position. I told him I wanted a clean break, minimal drama, and absolutely no opening for her to come back later and claim anything more. Mark drafted a separation agreement that was as straightforward as it gets. Claire would keep her car and any personal belongings. She'd take half of the joint savings. No alimony, as she was fully employed and earning her own income. No claim to the house or my inheritance. Each party responsible for their own debts going forward. North Carolina requires a 1-year separation before filing for divorce, unless there's proven marital misconduct. I didn't care to drag her name through court with accusations. The clean break was more valuable to me than revenge in that moment. When I handed her the separation papers, she looked almost smug. She thought she was the one calling the shots. She signed without reading too closely. No lawyer, no pushback. In her mind, she was trading up soon and didn't need to squeeze me for more. A week later, she moved into an apartment closer to downtown. I didn't ask where the money came from for the security deposit. I assumed she had a stash saved up. I later found out one of her friends from her girls' nights had been helping her out. From what I heard, He was recently divorced and had a taste for younger women who liked to spend money. Perfect match for her, at least temporarily. After she left, the house felt bigger, quieter, and for the first time in years, peaceful. I kept my same routine for a while. Up at 6 a.m., coffee, gym, work, home. I didn't change my lifestyle yet because I didn't want to be tempted to reach out or broadcast my freedom. The thing about walking away without bitterness is that you're not looking for validation. I wasn't posting on Facebook about how great my life was. I wasn't out partying or throwing money around. My satisfaction came from knowing I'd just stepped away from financial and emotional drain, and I'd done it cleanly, without losing a cent of what truly mattered. About 3 months into our separation, Claire sent me a text. "Hope you're doing okay. Maybe we can meet up and talk." I ignored it. 2 weeks later, another text. "Just wanted to see if you'd be open to grabbing dinner." My treat. I ignored that too. It wasn't cruelty. It was discipline. I knew her type. She didn't want me. She wanted the stability she just walked away from. But I wasn't about to be anyone's backup plan. By the time our 1-year separation period ended and I filed the divorce paperwork, she had stopped trying to contact me. I heard from mutual acquaintances that her downtown romance had ended when the guy realized she was draining his bank account. She was already on dating apps, trying to find her next financial safety net. Walking away from Claire wasn't about hating her. It was about choosing myself. Most men in my position, after receiving a large inheritance, might have been tempted to flaunt it or win her back with gifts. But that's not winning. That's losing control of your self-respect. Instead, I let her leave thinking she was moving on to something better. She didn't know she just walked away from more financial security than she could have ever dreamed of. And I didn't need her to know. The victory was in my solitude, my peace, and the knowledge that I'd protected everything I'd worked for. After the divorce was finalized, my life shifted into a different gear. It wasn't about sudden extravagance or some midlife crisis spending spree. It was about living with intention. I had more than enough money to do whatever I wanted, but I've been raised to understand that money was a tool, not a trophy. I invested most of it, a balanced portfolio of real estate, blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, and a few private business ventures with people I trusted. I wasn't chasing high-risk thrills. I was securing my future so I'd never have to answer to anyone again. I moved out of the old house, not because I couldn't stand the memories, but because I wanted a fresh start. I bought a 3-acre property on the edge of Lake Norman. The house wasn't some gaudy mansion. It was a well-built, modern home with clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view of the water that made mornings feel like a gift. I had a private dock, a modest boat, and a small workshop where I could work on woodworking projects, something I'd always enjoyed but never had time for when my life was full of someone else's demands. The biggest change wasn't material, though. It was internal. I woke up without that constant low-level tension of wondering what mood I'd be coming home to, or whether my refusal to hand over money for something frivolous would turn into another Cold War in the house. I was entirely in control of my time, my energy, and my finances. That kind of freedom changes a man's posture. You stand straighter when you're not carrying dead weight. I didn't rush into dating. People love to say, "You should get back out there," as if companionship is an obligation. I didn't want someone filling the space just because it was empty. I started traveling. A week in Montana for fly fishing, a trip to Italy to see the architecture I'd only ever read about, and a few months renting a cabin in Vermont during the fall, when the air is crisp and the leaves light up the hills like fire. I'd go alone or with a small group of friends who understood my pace of life. No drama, no agenda, just genuine connection. Meanwhile, Claire's life was unraveling. I didn't go looking for information, but in a city like ours, news travels. Mutual acquaintances mentioned she'd bounced between a few relationships, each one shorter than the last. Apparently, she had a reputation now, the kind that makes potential partners keep their guard up. One guy she dated owned a small car dealership, and word was she started pressing him to take her on trips within 2 months of meeting. That ended quickly. From what I heard, she'd sold the SUV I'd let her keep and used the cash to cover rent and bills while she figured things out. The problem was, she never actually figured things out. Her dental hygienist job was still there, but her hours had been cut when the office downsized. Instead of tightening her belt, she tried to maintain the same lifestyle she'd had when she was with me. Dinners out, shopping sprees, weekends away. That lifestyle on a single, reduced income? It's a fast track to debt. At some point, she started dabbling in online side hustles, but not the legitimate kind. A friend told me she'd been messaging older men on dating apps, leading them on for gifts and cash. Maybe it worked for a while, but schemes like that don't last. People catch on. Screenshots get shared. Eventually, you run out of marks. One evening, about 3 years after our divorce, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Daniel, it's me." Her voice hadn't changed, but it had a tired edge to it. I stayed silent, letting her fill the gap. I was just thinking, maybe we could meet for coffee. Just to talk. I've been through a lot lately. I knew exactly what this was. Not nostalgia. Not remorse. This was fishing, seeing if I still had any interest, if there was any chance I'd step back into her life as a safety net. "Claire," I said evenly, "I'm glad you're surviving, but I'm not interested in revisiting the past." "You don't even want to hear me out?" she asked, her voice sharpening. "No," I replied simply. "We already closed that chapter. I'm living my life, and I think you should focus on yours." She sighed, muttered something under her breath, and hung up. That was the last time she tried to contact me directly. After that, I kept hearing bits and pieces. She'd moved in with a boyfriend who kicked her out after a fight. She tried selling some kind of skincare products online. She'd fallen behind on rent and was couch hopping. Each story painted the same picture. A woman chasing comfort without building stability. As for me, my solitude wasn't loneliness. I had friends I trusted, hobbies I loved, and the ability to wake up every day and decide exactly what I wanted to do without compromise. Some nights, I'd sit out on my deck with a glass of bourbon, watching the water, and think about how close I'd come to living the rest of my life under someone else's control. I'd remember the way she looked at me in those last months, like I was a disappointment. She had no idea she was looking at a man worth millions. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing you don't have to prove anything to anyone. The money was never the point. The point was peace, and I had it in full supply. Claire could keep running in circles, try to charm her way into someone else's wallet. I was done with that world. I had my own, and it was more than enough. If there's one thing I took from all of it, it's this: when you know your worth, you don't need to argue for it. You just live it. And eventually, the people who underestimated you realize exactly what they lost, though by then, it's far too late for them.